Welcome back. We're going to continue from the initial pinch pot video and start adding some things, and I'm going to be creating a pinch pot rendition of Little Bub, probably the cutest cat ever. So let's get started. If you wrapped your pinch pot up really well, it should still be nice and moist, and we shouldn't have any problems with it being too dry. So this pinch pot is still awesome, not at all dry. And what I'm going to do to get started is to just start shaping this into the, start of a cat shape. So I think the top of the pinch pot needs to be a little wider. So I'm just going to kind of press outwards from the inside with my fingers to kind of widen it out a little bit. You don't want to do too much right away, otherwise you might risk breaking the pinch pot. And then I want the sides to kind of go straight down instead of kind of flaring outwards. So what I'm going to do is something, it's a sewing term, it's called a dart. And usually you don't want to do just one, because it'll make things a little bit uneven. So I'm going to find the sides that I see they're flaring out the most, which would be this side here. Yeah, these two sides. And I'm going to cut some V's into them to kind of stitch them up a little bit. So usually what you do on one side, you should do on the other side. And I don't need it to go in a lot, so I'm not going to cut a really deep V. And you don't want to cut through immediately. It's best to go in a couple passes, that way you don't distort your clay. So that took me about 4 passes to really get through there. Now what comes up next is stitching up the dart. So in order to attach any two pieces of clay together, we need to score, slip, and smear. So I'm going to score my edges. Usually the rougher they are, the better. I'll set that down. We'll need to slip. So sometimes you might need to give your slip a little stir to mix it up a little bit. And you don't need a lot of slip. If you overdo it, then your stuff just gets mushy. So just a little bit of slip, you can wipe off the extra. And then you're just going to press the pieces together. And smear the seam. And don't forget to smear on the inside as well. So you want to make sure that the seam is completely covered. We don't want to see it at all anymore. And then that area might be a little bit fragile for a while until the clay starts to stiffen up. So you don't want to be squeezing the pinch pot any more than you have to. Just try and leave it alone when you're working on it. So at this point we're going to move on and start creating some forms on the pinch pot. A quick reminder is, if you have clay that you're not using, say for example this piece that I just cut out and I'm not using it, always wrap this stuff up. Otherwise pieces like this dry out very quickly. So wrap it up, then you don't have to worry about having to go get more clay because it'll stay nice and moist for you. I'm going to begin with creating Bub's little arms coming off of the side of the pinch pot. So I'm going to take 2 equally sized lumps of clay, and what I'm going to do to get started is just kind of round these out a little bit. You can just give it a tap on the table to get started. I'm going to kind of smooth over these lumps here. And start to bend them into shape. So before I attach them, I want to make sure they're about the same. It's a lot easier to change things before they're attached. So here where we start to see cracks, you want to smooth those out right away so you don't have to worry about them later. They're much easier to smooth out when they're fresh cracks rather than cracks on drying out clay. So right now I'm just kind of figuring out where these pieces should go. I do a lot of the sculpting once I attach things onto the piece, so I'm not too concerned about it perfect shapes right now. So what I need to do to attach these pieces is score, slip, and smear. So I need to score both sides that I'm going to attach. And once we have a slip on, we will attach the pieces. And then we will smear them on. So since they're arms, they kind of have to be fully attached to the body. So I'm going to smear onto the bottom here. Something you might want to think about is supporting the inside of the pinch pot if you have kind of some hard to smear areas. That way you don't accidentally dent your pinch pot or cause any unnecessary cracks. So since this clay that I'm smearing right now is pretty thick and I'm smearing it all the way up to blend it together, I really need to make sure that I am supporting the inside. And always be on the lookout for cracks as you're going along. Okay, so I've got basic lumps here for his arms. I'm going to worry about details and specifics a little bit later, but right now I'm just kind of building the basic form. So as you can see, we're starting to get more of a head shape, kind of by squeezing around where the chin and the body kind of change. And some of these areas I'm going to need to add more clay, just because what I have here isn't quite enough. Other areas I can take my hand in, and while supporting the pinch pot I can pinch or press outwards to shape things a little bit more. So just depending on how thick your pinch pot is, you can do some more manipulation, but if it's pretty thin, this is a dangerous thing to be doing. But I left mine kind of thick on purpose. Alright, So I'm going to start working on the face right now, and again, like you see, there's not a lot of detail yet, and that's okay. Right now I'm just working on creating basic forms as I go along. So I'm going to grab some more clay, and I'm going to work on his nose and mouth area. Alright, so there's just kind of the basic shapes. And then the majority of the shaping is actually going to happen once I start attaching and sculpting everything together. So we'll score, slip, and smear. To make his eyes, I'm actually just going to make a sphere and then cut it in half. That way I know they're both the same. So I'll make sure it's about the right size. Bub's got some big eyes. And lastly, for right now, I'm going to add some eyelids. So usually I just take a hunk of clay and shape the bottom part of the lid so that it's smooth and flat, and then I just worry about the smearing a little bit later. So I look at the shape of the eyelid and try to follow that as best I can. You want to make that part kind of thin, because if it's too thick it looks kind of weird. I usually don't score on the eye itself, just so we have kind of a good definition between eye and eyelid. So once they're stuck on, then we can smear this chunk of clay into place to kind of form the brow.